Hello, welcome to the Grow Your Wealthy Mindset podcast, where it is all about helping amazing physicians just like you create a wealthy life free from burnout and with the financial security to practice medicine on your own terms. I'm your host, Dr. Elisa Chiang. I'd like to welcome our guest, Dr. Johanna Moore, to the Grow Your Wealthy Mindset podcast. Dr. Moore is a mom of twins. She's also a Harvard-trained physician scientist, as well as a life and business coach. She's the founder of She Is Money, as well as the podcast host for Your Version of Success podcast. Why don't you introduce yourself further?
Hi, I am so glad to be here with you today. I just feel like it's such a great opportunity for the two of us to talk to your audience about money and about how to really get started and understand why you would want to invest in the first place. So thanks for having me.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Why don't you tell us more about She Is Money and how you're working with women to help them create more time and money to have better lives?
Absolutely. She Is Money is a success strategy company. I focus on women who are already successful, but feel like they've reached a point where all they're doing is working really hard and they don't have the money, the time, or the energy to enjoy the lives that they've worked so hard to accomplish. And the So Money Society is a place where ambitious women come together and they create the health, the wealth, and the happiness that they so deserve. And I just really feel like it's something near and dear to my heart because I am one of those people. I have gone through my epiphany story of realizing that I was on this rat race and that I was never going to actually accomplish the goals that I really wanted the way that I was working at that time. I am a Harvard-trained pathologist. I did my residency at the Massachusetts General Hospital, and I have multiple fellowships and board certifications and all the things. And I finally made it to private practice, and I was so excited and pretty dang proud of myself. I can remember right when I started, maybe the weekend right after I started, I was sitting at the pool at the club and the water was sparkling in front of me and my toes and my fingers were perfectly painted. And I could just feel that this was like, I'd finally made it in life. And I had this dream of becoming a partner and having my family and being able to cook amazing dinners for the upcoming pathologists joining when I was older. And I just thought that my life was perfect. And unfortunately, that version of success that I had painted in my mind really wasn't a reality. And the idea of that perfect life started to chip in about the same time that literally my toenails started to chip. I mean, it was like a couple of days of real work. And I realized that, private practice wasn't really that much different from residency. And that's when I started to wonder, well, how am I ever going to make it to that life where I get to go see my kids play soccer or take a day off and really enjoy the fruits of everything that I had worked for? And it took me a long time to really figure out, first of all, what that life really meant. And secondly, how to actually accomplish that. I think that a lot of us, we have this idea like unicorns and rainbows, and someday I will just wake up and I'll be able to work 3 hours a day and have enough money to buy a Porsche and also be able to see my kids play soccer after school. And then you realize, okay, so maybe that reality isn't true the way that I'm working right now. What is the reality that would really make me happy? And how do I get there?
Yeah, no, I think that a lot of times we want to be great at our careers. We want to have promotions or have acknowledgement and positions and take care of our patients. And then we want to be great wives. We want to be great moms. And it's really hard to do all those things great, right? Like there's only so many hours in the day.
Totally. And it's funny because I always subscribe to the idea that, well, you really can do anything you want. And what you're saying is, well, you really can.
Well, you can do anything you want. You just can't do everything you want.
I think that it's a little bit more sinister than that. I think that we think that we want those things, but it's only because society has imparted this expectation on us that we should be doing those things.
Oh, I totally agree. There's a lot of society imparting a whole lot of things, and especially as women imparting to us that we need to serve and give and not ask for more compensation, not ask for more of lots of things, and just kind of take it.
Absolutely. So, what happened with me was that I thought that I wanted to be a physician leader, and I was really good at it, just like, we're really good at everything that we try. So, I was really good at it, and I was succeeding in that arena. But then, after a few years of doing it, I realized that in order to be a physician leader and go to all the meetings, it took a toll on my practice as a pathologist, the quality of work and the time that I had to spend focusing on actual cases in pathology. And it took away from my time with my family because sometimes there were late meetings and sometimes I had to prepare for things. And what I realized was that deep desire to be the leader, to have the power, to have everybody know who I was, really wasn't actually what I wanted. It was what I thought I was supposed to have.
That's totally true, too. To become physicians, we're typically a little type A. We seek achievement, and we wanted the A's or we got the A's, and we want the A plus and the gold star, and we want the recognition. There's a little bit of that feeds our ego, and I'm not saying that we do it all out of ego, but I think we also place a little bit of our self-worth based on that recognition.
Absolutely. I always was striving to be the smartest person in the room, the most important person in the room. And it's hard because a lot of times you're not the most important person in the room or the smartest person in the room. And then what do you do then?
Yeah, no, I definitely grew up with feeling like I had something to prove. Doesn't help that I grew up as a complete minority. There were almost no Asians where I grew up. In fact, it was actually a very Jewish community, interestingly. So my parents chose it because of the value on education, and that was a good public school. But I definitely had this sense of like almost proving my stereotype in a way, but also saying that, well, it's not like I'm good at math because I'm Chinese. It's because I work hard to study math.
Right. And even that stereotype that you work hard in order to achieve what you need is something that hinders us later in life. And I think that that's something that women who we teach and who we coach, they don't understand that because they're just reaching that threshold, that tipping point where you really don't have any more time or effort to put in order to achieve more. You have to find the next way to succeed.
Yeah, and I do think that as girls, we are starting to be told that we can do anything, which is great, that we're not at least being told that we have to stay at home and take care of the kids and get married, and that's the purpose of our life. But it's kind of that now there's the pressure of like also having a career and being at home. And being a stay-at-home mom is a full-time job.
Oh my gosh. Yes, it is.
And it's not a job that all of us necessarily want, but we do want to be present for our kids. But we don't necessarily have the time to bake cupcakes for our kids' bake sales at school. I personally don't have kids, but I see my sister, who's not a physician, but she's a professional. And yeah, there's not the time to kind of do all the things that you see other parents or other moms doing.
And I think it's also hard because that sense of wanting to be the best and to succeed, it ekes out into your personal life, whether you have kids or not. Like you want to be the best girlfriend, you want to be the best wife, you want to be the best mom, you want your house to be clean. And all of those things take a lot of time and effort.
I've even coached women physicians that don't even feel like they belong in their communities because they live in, nice upper middle class type suburbs with beautiful houses, but they're not able to keep their house clean all the time, and they're not able to drop their children off at daycare. So they don't really connect with the other mothers in the community because a lot of the other mothers apparently aren't working or working part-time or definitely not having the same demanding type job as a full-time or even a 0.8 FTE physician.
Absolutely. The good news, I think, though, is that especially post COVID, we have seen a lot of people start to realize that they do have other options in life. And just figuring out how to do those options, I think, is such a great point of value for someone like you who, teaches women how to invest in a way that you actually could have extra cash flow. And then it becomes a choice of, okay, so I'm really good at leadership, but if it's not bringing in more money and it's not giving me more time to spend doing things that I want to do and I love doing and that fulfill me and make my life real, then should I really be doing that? I think that it seeps in even to, your job as a physician. I did a poll once in one of the Facebook groups about who here loves their job as a physician. And most of the people in that group said that they love being the physicians, but they just don't want to do it like until they die. So I think that that's a really positive and very optimistic point, is that I still love medicine. I just don't want to perform medicine the way that I have in the past, like it consuming my entire life and to a point where I don't even know if I like what I'm doing anymore.
Yeah, and I think that's probably true for anything you like to do, right? If you've got a hobby, do you really want to do that hobby 60 hours a week?
Yeah, I definitely think that there's a limit. And I think that this is something that all professional women deal with. Like if you're a copywriter, you might really love writing, but if you're told in order to make the money that you want, you have to write 10,000 words a day, well, then it's not really that much fun anymore.
So when you talk about money with your group, what are the topics that typically come up?
One thing that I've been working on recently with my group that is a very interesting perspective that I think a lot of people don't think about is, once you formulate this kind of plan of what your dream life really looks like, after you've filtered out all of the outside influence and really taken a look inside of what your real values are, how do you actually financially make that happen? I think that most people don't know what they want, truly. They've never actually thought about it succinctly and clarified exactly the things that they want and why they want them. And so if you've already come up with some sort of loose idea of what you would like your life to be like, then you have to figure out, how am I going to fund that? And most people don't think about it that way. And so that's one thing that we've been talking about a lot in the society is, okay, so this is my minimum baseline, in order to live life. This is what I normally spend. How much more money do I need in order to have the things that I really want right now? And how much more money do I need in order to retire at a certain time, whether it's tomorrow or in 10 years or in 20 years? And I think that a small percentage of us, maybe half of women in medicine, we do end up finding our way one way or another to a financial planner. And we go through all the numbers of like, okay, well, this is how much you need to invest every year in order to get your kids in college. And this is how much you need to invest every year in order to retire at this amount of money. And, I'd say probably, hopefully half of us do that. But then that's all we do. We just assume, well, I'm just going to keep working really hard until I retire and everything is spoken for already. But what if you thought about it more in a way of anything is possible? So if you've already figured out financially what it takes in order to retire and what it takes in order to get your kids in college, why can't you figure out what it takes to live like an amazing life where you go on vacation 3 months a year?
Yeah, no, I think it's really about thinking what would make an amazing life now, and then maybe looking at how to fund that amazing life now while still building for the future so that you're taking care of your future self.
Exactly. And I think that's really where my love for entrepreneurship and investing really takes effect is, okay, we can have a good life or we could have an amazing life that we dream up. And in order to fund that, we already understand that we don't have any more time or energy to do anything else. So how are we going to grow our salaries, increase the amount of money we have, the amount of cash flow we have, the amount that we can invest if we don't have any more time to do that?
Right. And sometimes they say the enemy of great is good.
Yes. Sometimes it's so hard to move forward. I see this in goal setting all the time because we focus a lot on goals in the society. A lot of people have a goal, but it's really sort of like a fantasy. Like that would be really nice, but they don't actually want to let go of what they're doing now in order to get there. And I think that's what you're talking about.
Yeah, that's exactly it. So in order to build who you want to be or what you want to have, sometimes you have to give up who you are now and go through, that river of misery where you're building yourself up to who you want to be.
Yeah, that happened to me when I left my first job, the job where I was sitting at the pool, and I thought that that was going to be my job forever and that my fellow partners were going to become like my family. And it was it was like a divorce for me to realize that I needed to leave because my path was different.
And so where did you go from there?
Well, I quit my employment position and I started my first company, which was a medical corporation, and I worked for other groups separately. I was an independent contractor. So I contracted through different groups and worked for them in the hospitals, and that was very mind-opening because it gave me a lot of respect for my old bosses and for what they had built, because it's not an easy feat and you really need a lot of resources. Especially, I'm a pathologist, so I needed a laboratory, I needed a hospital, I needed courier system, I needed an electronic medical record system. All of those things as a single person just trying to sign out cases, it was very challenging. And so it gave me a lot of respect for those who came before me, who built the company that I left. And I think for me, it gave me a lot of closure because instead of being angry like they were right and they were wrong and I was right, it made me realize that we just had different paths. And so what was the path for me? And that's really when I started to focus on She Is Money and on coaching and on helping other successful women, because I realized that that really had become a labor of love for me. And I had suddenly gained all of this knowledge on how a business works and the financial implications of what a business does and the tax implications and a lot of things that I never even knew existed before I quit. I didn't even know that those things were things that I would need to learn. And when I learned them, I realized what powerful tools they were to help me increase my wealth. And nobody had ever taught me about that. So I didn't know that they existed. And then when I first started learning about them, I didn't know that it was possible for me to do those things. Like, I just felt like I spent my entire life honing in and becoming an expert in medicine. And now I'm an expert in medicine. And now I'm realizing that I have to learn all these other skills that I don't know. And it really blew my mind for a long time. And I was limited by the feeling that I was a doctor and I couldn't do anything else. And I wasn't able to learn how to make money in any way except by signing out cases for patients.
Yeah, it's interesting because not that long ago, most physicians either worked for themselves in their own private practice or they work for another physician. And it's only in the last few years where we've turned where most physicians are working for a hospital system or a corporate system and not working for another physician. And it's like we've lost our way in some ways, such that we're not, taking charge of being like the head of the medical business. And when you think about it, it makes sense. They don't teach us anything about business in medical school or residency or fellowship or any of that training. And if you also think about it, because we're really doing our training within the hospital systems, the hospitals don't actually necessarily want us to be in autonomy, right? They want to control us. They want us to think that we need them, that we need to be employed by them. And that's the best way to go. And it's almost like they teach us, yeah, just take care of the medicine. We'll take care of everything else. And that way they can control us.
Ah, that is so good and so on point. And it's not just the hospital system or the academic system. It's like layer upon layer upon layer of people who want us to just do our jobs at their benefit. And we don't even know that that influence is happening to us. We don't even know that the reason why people go to school and move into the workforce is because the United States of America needs a workforce. Like, nobody ever thinks about it in that way. Like, why do you think it's so important for us to have a retirement plan? Because the assumption is that you work for somebody else. And then what happens when you stop trading your time for money? But that's not how the uber rich or the uber successful live their lives. As you know very well, and as you teach, they use their money, they use their ideas, they use their creativity, and they leverage everything else around them so that they aren't the ones trading their time for money.
And that's why the income disparity or wealth disparity is just becoming wider and wider. That gap is bigger and bigger. It's because that the very small, not even the top 1%, the 0.1%, the most wealthy people in the country, they have amassed so much wealth, but for them to keep their position, it means having more and more workers, more and more employees. Our school systems are really trained to provide those workers and employees.
Absolutely. And there's even this big, I think, paradigm shift happening in our entrepreneurial populations that you and I both listen to that are saying, is college really worth it anymore? And I think that that's like such a huge mind shift change, because I don't know about you, but all my life, like the whole goal was to get into a great college and then get into a great medical school. And like the thought of like, it's like mind blowing, the thought like, wait, there's people out there who never even make it to college and they're like, have these amazing businesses and they're living in Aspen with their Range Rovers. Like, what? Like, how is that even possible?
I know. I actually think about contractors all the time, right? Plumbers, electricians, they end up becoming entrepreneurs and they actually end up doing, I mean, they can do really well, right? I mean, there's a whole span. You can have someone who just ends up being an employee for a big company, but there are a lot of those called tradespeople where they learn the skill and they build a company around it. They hire other people to be working in it. They work in the business. They really become a business owner and they really do great for themselves. And you're right. Like, is college even necessary? Because we actually probably have somewhat of a shortage of great contractors and businesses of that sort because of this big push of like everyone should go to college. If you're smart enough to go to college, you should go to college. But that doesn't actually necessarily provide for all the things we need. And if you look at some of the richest men, they went to college, but they didn't actually graduate, right? Bill Gates.
Zuckerberg. Yeah, absolutely. Well, what do you think is the solution right now for those of us who we don't want to just leave medicine and start over, but we realize that there's something needs to change? What is your solution?
Yes, we definitely need good doctors out there. I mean, if anything, the selfish component is like, I want doctors to still take care of me, right? We all are patients as well as those of us who are physicians. And I think part of it is, well, so I'm an employed physician and I'm not trying to knock being an employed physician, but I found, I currently work at a physician-owned practice and physicians are active in working the practice, but they also hired a CEO who actually does a lot of kind of the business things. But the CEO really answers to the physicians. So it's not like we have to necessarily learn all the business things. And we are totally capable of learning the business things and letting other people do the implementation. I think really kind of embracing, yes, we can learn business. We can learn the business of medicine. We can have autonomy back in our lives. We don't have to do this alone. We can partner with other people. And we don't have to be at the mercy of like hospital systems. Or if we are in a hospital system, how do we have more physicians in those places of leadership that a physician is the CEO?
Yeah.
And not somebody who's an MBA or unfortunately even like a nurse. Like there are hospitals where there's a nurse that's the CEO. And not to knock nurses, I mean, it's an important profession, but I do think that physicians should be leading medicine.
Absolutely. I agree completely. I think there's a couple of other things, though, at play. One is separating the ethics of selling with the ethics of medicine. I think that's a deeply entwined combination that a lot of physicians have a difficult time with. And going back to your statement about how not very long ago, most physicians actually were in some way or another entrepreneurs. I think that a lot has changed with reimbursement and with the amount of patients that physicians see now. I can remember stories from some of the partners and also some of the other, similar aged physicians like in gastroenterology and in other specialties in the hospital talk about how in the early 80s they did like one or two procedures and then they just hung out in the cafeteria all day long and that's all they had to do. And so really the times have changed, the economics of medicine have changed. And I think that that pressure is butting up against the pressure of selling. And, before it was really easy for a physician to knock like a dermatologist and say like, well, they're selling cosmetic products and that's a conflict of interest. They're trying to sell to their patients these products just because they get a cut of it. Or looking at, oncologists and like how they have infusion centers. And that's like a conflict of interest because they're getting money back from the infusion centers. And I think that there was a time when we were able to sit on our high horses and say like, no, you should just practice medicine and you should try to not bring in any extra added income because we were getting reimbursed so well. But now it's like, well, do you want your dermatologist to sell you cosmetics that they like? Or do you want them to see 80 patients a day and only spend 3 minutes with you? Like,
Yeah, that is an interesting point you make. I mean, there was definitely a time for physicians kind of sold snake oil. Right? I'm just trying to think like, over 100 years ago, like what the practice of medicine was like. And the practice of medicine has certainly evolved quite a bit over the years. Actually, in college, I took a class on like the history of medicine. It was really interesting. But yeah, no, I do think that we have to look a little bit at some of the ethical standpoints on these things. I do think that as physicians that we tend to have fairly high set of ethics, though of course there's always some black sheep in that. At first, when you were talking about selling, I was thinking like, well, as physicians, we kind of have to sell everything these days, right? As an acutoplastic surgeon, I sell doing surgery to fix the problem. And I'll go through, well, this is one surgery we could do. If it is a condition where multiple procedures could potentially resolve it, talk about whatever those procedures are, or medication versus procedure, or the different options of treatment, and also the risk of not treating, of not correcting the problem. And in the end, I'm actually selling usually what I think is best for the patient, but leaving the choice up to the patient. And there was a time in medicine where, and I think there's still some patients to be like, well, what would you do? Or what would you tell your mother to do? Because they're just looking for you to give them, quote, the answer instead of actually even giving them options. So it is interesting how medicine has shifted that way.
yeah. Well, all in all, I think that it's still possible to make money in medicine for sure and in an ethical way. And for me, I think that the most important thing, if that's what you choose to do, is to try to increase the amount of money that you're making in your practice right now, is to really focus on what the patient needs. I think that we think about patients in context of what they need, what their health needs. And I think we do a really good job with that. But I also think that there's a lot of other things that we learned and were trained on in medicine that we don't focus on that would still help the patient. A lot of education, that I think that most doctors could really flesh that out and really bring a lot more value to their patients, and in turn earn, increase their salaries in that way. I think that for me, that's the most direct way to increase your bottom line, is to just increase your overall value as a physician.
Yeah. And from a practical point, working from the point of being a physician and delegating to someone else the lower task that someone, I mean, if you can pay someone $15, $20 an hour to do something to release your time to see another patient, that's totally worth it.
Absolutely. And it's not, I'm not just talking about mid-levels, seeing patients for you, but more like, if there are things that you're doing during your day that even if you're good at, even if you might like them, you could get somebody else to do for a portion of that price, then maybe you should consider doing that. Like, I know a lot of physicians who are still scribing on their own and still importing, all orders on their own. And those things, first of all, nobody likes doing those things. And second of all, you're just really wasting your time. I know when I talked about how I had my medical corporation, I was doing some research on the side, some independent contractor research, and there were a lot of things that were sort of like tabulating specific numbers. And I was doing it, and I really wanted to die every time I did it. It was just so mind-numbing. And I trained one of the techs in my laboratory to do it. And I was happy to pay her $50 an hour, which for her was like mind blowing, but I was getting paid $500 an hour to do it myself. So I paid her a portion of that. She was happy with that. She did it perfectly. I overlooked her work, and I was able to move on to more important things that only I could do.
Yeah, no, certainly scribes, someone to call the patients with information, or someone to fill out their FMLA paperwork, right? You like fill out a template and you teach someone how to fill out the rest, and you sign at the bottom.
Totally. Even things like if you're in academia, like you're a PhD. I did a lot of research when I was in academia, and even outside of academia, you can actually find a virtual assistant who will do all the research for you, like pull all the publications, like things that you got scudded out when you were in med school, like find 20 articles on this topic and give me a summary of what they said. Like, you can pay people a nominal amount of money to do that for you.
Yeah, that's a great point. Like, yes, go find the actual references for these facts.
Yeah. And we're perfectionists. So like, we'll spend 3 hours putting together a PowerPoint, like making sure that the words all look right. And it's like, really?
Yeah, paying someone else to spell check and grammar check.
Oh, it's been so nice talking to you.
Why don't you tell us more about your membership program?
Absolutely. As I said before, She Is Money is so near and dear to my heart. It is a collection of ambitious, successful women. They bridge the gap between fully employed and not really knowing very much about investing or business, to women who have full grown businesses, trying to get their first $1 million a year businesses going. So it's a wide variety, and it's a wide variety of professional categories. So there's some doctors, there's some scientists, there's some people in academia. And I think that that's really part of the beauty of the group, is that there are so many different perspectives on how to be successful and what you're an expert in, that there's a lot of crosstalk amongst different perspectives of life, and like what it means to make money and have time and enjoy your time inside and outside of work. So I think that that's one of the values of our group, is that there's a lot of different perspectives. And part of the group is actually, we split into 4 sessions a month. And one of the sessions is actually just the mastermind of somebody coming and saying, I have this problem. I'm unsure how to overcome this challenge, whether it's, figuring out work-life balance or a certain goal, or, mastering how to manage other people. And you put it out there and you say what you've tried or maybe what you've learned so far. And then somebody else inevitably has already done it, and they get to tell you how they experienced it and what they did in order to problem solve that problem. So it's not just a coaching community where I'm always coaching everybody on their challenges. That of course happens all the time, but it's really much more of a collaborative community. And that's why it's so beautiful.
All right. And where can our listeners find you if they want to reach out?
If you love podcasts, please listen to my podcast. It's the Your Version of Success podcast. We delve into what it really means to be happy, what success actually means in a way that's fulfilling and keeps you passionate about your life. If you would like to look me up on Instagram, I'm at sheismoney.llc, and always visit my website. It has everything possible that you can learn about me. It's at www.sheismoney.com.
And we'll have all that information in the show notes. Thanks so much for listening to this week's episode of the Grow Your Wealthy Mindset podcast. See you next week. If you enjoyed this episode, I would love it if you could share it with your friends and colleagues. And now for the disclaimer. I am not a certified financial planner, accountant, or attorney, and nothing I say should be construed as professional investment, tax, or legal advice. This show is primarily for your education and entertainment. I am a physician, but I'm probably not your physician. So if you need any medical advice, please contact your own physician. Thank you.